Father, we're so grateful we have this opportunity to come back again and to study from your word and to sing praises to your name. Grateful, Father, that we have this avenue of prayer where we can come to you, giving our petitions. So grateful, Father, that you watch over us, that you give us the things that we need in our daily lives. Continue to bless us. We ask this time, Father, that you be with those who are sick, all those that Aaron mentioned moments ago, those in the hospitals, those that are recovering from illnesses. Pray that you'll continue to be with them and help them get back with us once again. We're mindful of those that have lost loved ones recently, saddened by that, and pray, Father, that you'll be with their families this time as they go through this grief. Strengthen them and help them to look to you for that strength. Thankful, Father, for the congregation here. Thankful, Father, for the work that we're doing. We pray, Father, that you'll be with us in our work. Pray, Father, that our efforts here will increase, that we'll have more to come, more to become members of your church. Grateful, Father, for Jesus and for the sacrifice that he gave in our stead. His willingness to leave heaven and to come to this earth and to be that ultimate sacrifice for us, going to that cross in our stead and nailing our sins to that cross. We're grateful, Father, for his love for us and for your love for us. Help us, Father, each and every day to live our lives in a way that's pleasing unto you. Help us, Father, to live that name, Christian, wear it proudly, do not tarnish it in any way. Pray, Father, that you'll continue to do the family, every family here represented, continue to be with their children, continue to help us, parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, to be that good example for them and to raise them up in a way that you would have them to go. Help us, Father, to realize that when we do sin, we need to repent of those things. We ask, Father, that you forgive us of those things at this time. Help us, Father, each and every day to overcome those temptations that we face. Help us, Father, to be that light in the world that we need to be. Be with Randy as he directs from out of scene. Be with Terry Joe as he brings our lesson tonight. Be with us, members here, to listen and to put our hearts into the worship service. Through Christ, we pray. Amen.
First song of singing, number 508. Sing all stanzas of this song, 508. Let every heart rejoice and sing, let all soul and tongue rise, yet in men and children bring to God your sacrifice. For he is good, the Lord is good, and hath all his ways. With songs and honors sounding loud, the Lord of praise. While the rocks and the rills, while the vales and the hills are glorious and all praise, let each song the grateful song and the God of our fathers praise, and the God of our fathers praise. He bids the sun to rise and set, in heaven his proudest song, and earth unto to him shall yet bow low before his throne. For he is good, the Lord is good, and hath all his ways. With songs and honors sounding loud, the Lord of hosts will praise. While the rocks and the rills, while the vales and the hills are glorious and all grace, let each song the grateful song and the God of our fathers praise, and the God of our fathers praise. we will sing the first, second, and fourth stanza of this song. If I walk in the pathway of duty, if I work till the close of the day, I shall see the great King in his beauty. When I come the last mile of the way, when I come the last mile of the way, I will rest at the close of the day, and I know there goes that with me. When I come the last mile of the way, if for Christ I proclaim the Christ for me, if I see or entreat gone astray, I am sure He will show me His glory. When I come the last mile of the way, when I come the last mile of the way, I will rest at the close of the day, and I know there are joys that await me. When I come the last mile of the way, and if here I have earned a sacred honor, and have cried all this sin to away, will enhance all the pasture of heaven. When I come the last mile of the way, when I come the last mile of the way, I will rest at the close of the day, and I know there are joys that await me. When I come the last mile of the way. For a lesson, we'll sing of 150. 150. Sing all stanzas of the song. There is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God, a place where sin cannot molest, near to the heart of God. Oh, Jesus, my Redeemer, save from the heart of God. Oh, this way before thee, near to the heart of God. There is a place of comforting, near to the heart of God, a place where we our Savior be, near to the heart of God. Oh, Jesus, my Redeemer, sent from the heart of God. Oh, us who wait before thee, near to the heart of God. There is a place of full release, near to the heart of God, a place where all is joy and peace, near to the heart of God. Oh, Jesus, my Redeemer, save from the heart of God. Oh, us who wait before thee, near to the heart of God. Our song of invitation number 523. 523.
You have your Bibles tonight, and I hope that you
do, I want you to turn with me to the book of Proverbs, because there are a number of verses that I want us to read together. We're going to talk about friendship. We're going to talk about friendship from the standpoint of how I choose my friends and what I need to be looking for in my friends. How my friends can either be a great help to me or they can be a great hindrance to me. And I need to be careful about choosing my friends. I need to do that in the very best way that is possible for me. So I work diligently, or I should work diligently, to choose my friends and to choose them wisely. It is possible that my friends may determine whether I spend eternity in heaven or in hell, simply because of who I choose to make my friends. I will also tell you that more commonly than not, those who have been your friends in childhood will not be your friends all through life. It is an unusual thing, in my experience, for us to have those who are truly our friends that have been our friends since we were in grade school together, or even in high school together. More commonly than not, those that we spent time with in school, as time goes on and as we grow into maturity and as we begin to have our own families, and we begin to kind of go our own ways, we often separate, and those that were friends in childhood don't continue to be our friends. They don't continue to be our close associates. And so those things change. And so I want to talk about this evening, I want to talk about the value of having good friends. And I want to talk about the things you need to look for in friends, as well as the things that you need to avoid in friends. There are some good qualities that you ought to seek from a friend. There are good qualities you ought to be looking for in a friend. There are those things that you ought to do yourself and that you ought to be yourself in order to be a good friend. In Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17, he says, "A friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." A friend loveth at all times. We need those who care about us, who are interested in us, who are our friends. You also notice in chapter 18 and verse 24 that he says, "A man that hath friends must show himself friendly." And there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. Now indeed, we should everyone have Jesus as our friend. We sometimes sing that song, "What a friend we have in Jesus." And truly, Jesus should be our friend. We should be His friend. We should have the closest of friendship with Him. And if we have no other friends, He surely ought to be a friend to us. But I will also tell you that if Jesus is truly your friend, if you are truly His friend, you'll find others that you'll have friendship with. There will be others that you will commonly enjoy a friendship with because of your friendship with Him. So may I encourage you, first and foremost, to have that friendship with Jesus. But my intention tonight is not to talk about the friendship we need with Jesus and talk about our friendship with Him, but rather talk about the friendship that we form or that we have with one another, with those that we associate with from time to time. And I'll remind you again that those friendships sometimes change as time passes. I can tell you that the friends that I have now, those that I consider to be really close, good friends, are friends that I've not had except for about the last part of my life, the last at least half of my life. Not friends when I was young, not friends when I was growing up, not friends that I have associated with all my life. But there are those that have become really close friends and really those that I care about. I will also tell you that there are those that I didn't think much about friendship with when I was growing up that were not of the same, that I didn't have the same relationship with as I was growing up, that could not have been my friends when I was growing up because I didn't need them to be my friends, that became my friends as I got older. My mother and daddy were two of the best friends I ever had as I got to the end of their lives. They were two that I loved to be around, I loved to be with, I sought their counsel, I looked to be with them, I looked to enjoy time with them. They were, no doubt, two of my very best friends. They're gone, but they were two of my best friends. But I can tell you that when I was a teenager, they weren't my friends.
They were my mother and my dad. And they treated me as if I were their son, not as if I were their buddy or their friend. But there was a relationship that changed as time went on. They continued to be my mother and father. But there was a difference in the relationship that we had because we became closer as friends than just as parent and child. The idea of friendship is something that's valuable. The idea of having a friend is something that all of us need. The idea of having no friends. I sometimes hear people that say, I just don't have any friends. Brother, going through life without friends is difficult. Going through life with the wrong friends is even more difficult. You need to choose your friends, and you need to choose them wisely. And you need to realize, as he says there, that a friend is someone who cares about you at all times, no matter whether you're up or down, wherever you are in life, they care for you and they love you and they're interested in you and they're interested in the best for you at all times. The second thing is that you have a friend that is your friend because he shows himself to be friendly. He opens himself up to be your friend, and that's why you enjoy that relationship with him. You ought to seek friends that give you wise counsel. Not all friends give wise counsel. If every friend gave you wise counsel, then the wise man would not be talking to you about being careful about your friends. In chapter 27, in Proverbs chapter 27, if you drop down to verse 9, he says, ointment and perfume rejoice the heart, so does the sweetness of a man's friend a hearty counsel. A good friend will give you good counsel. He'll give you counsel that's sweet and good, more so than what others will try to get you to do or others will try to lead you into doing. Be careful that you seek out those who give you good counsel, who give you good help and instruction. Look for those who are indeed those who will be good friends to you. Back in Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 14, he says, where no counsel is, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Brethren, when we have good friends, they can help us. They can help us and guide us and give us direction in life that can keep us from having many of the hardships that we face in life. We need those who care about us and who can give us good counsel. Those that we can talk to. May not always agree with and probably won't. May not always listen to and probably won't. But we need those who care about us and who will give us wise counsel and who will tell us, who will give us instruction that is helpful to us. May not always be the answer, but they'll give us help that'll help us to formulate the answer in our own minds. We choose our friends. You choose who will be your friend. You choose them in the way that you go about life day by day. Now I'm going to tell you, there's some folks you don't need as a friend. And first thing that I would tell you is that there are some people you ought not to be friends with. I want you to note that the wise man here says there are numbers of folks that you don't need to be so friendly with. Look in Proverbs chapter 20. And in Proverbs chapter 20, drop down to verse 19. You don't need this friend. He said, he that goeth about as a talebearer revealeth secrets. Therefore meddle not with him that flattereth with his lips. You don't need that friend. That's not someone you need as a friend. Someone who will flatter you to your face. And someone who will go about bearing tales and telling others. He says that's not who you need as a friend. That's not the one who you're looking for. Look over chapter 22. In chapter 22, drop down to verses 24 and 25. He says, make no friendship with an angry man. And with a furious man thou shalt not go. Lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul. He said, don't make your friends among angry people. Brother, you ever known people that just seem like they were mad at the world and as if they almost had to have something to be upset about and something to be mad about every hour of every day? They were looking for something to be angry about. And they were angry. They were furious as they were going through life. Nothing was ever right. He says, don't make friends with those people. They're not good for you. They're not who you need. Now listen to me. You may not like who I picked for your friends. And probably, if you want to know the truth of the matter, I probably wouldn't be the one to pick your friends. I probably wouldn't be good at it. But I will tell you this. You need to choose your friends wisely. And you need to listen to what Solomon says, because Solomon is speaking by inspiration, and Solomon is saying these are the friends you need. And let me also tell you that if you have those that you consider to be your friends that flatter with their lips, but they're talebearers, or you've got those who are soon angry, you've got those who become furious at times. If you've got those that have that kind of an anger issue, you need to be careful about being such friends to them. Let me also warn you of another thing. When you have those that you think, well, I'm going to help them. I'm going to help them to be better. You may do that. More commonly than not, instead of you lifting them up, they're going to pull you down. So be careful about who your friends are. Now look in chapter 23. And in chapter 3, look at verses 20 and 21. He said, be not among wine bibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh. For the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. He said, don't associate yourself with, don't surround yourself with, don't make your friends those that enjoy drinking and carousing. They're not who you need. They're not the ones that are going to help you draw closer to God. Let me also tell you again, if you think in your mind, these are such good people, and if maybe I can have an influence on them, and maybe I can keep them from doing these things, more commonly than not, they're going to get you to do things you ought not, rather than you getting them to do right. And if you think I'm going to hold on to my friendship, and I'm going to correct them, and I'm going to make them better, more commonly than not, it doesn't work that way. And Solomon says, don't make yourself a friend of a drunkard. Don't make yourself a friend of someone who is a wine bibber. Don't make yourself a friend of someone who's engaging himself in alcohol. Because those who engage in such come to poverty and to destruction. Look over chapter 24. He said, my son, fear thou the Lord and King, and meddle not with them that are given to change. For their calamity shall rise suddenly. Who knoweth the ruin of them both? Really, when you got people that are always wanting to change, that don't have a set place in life, that don't have a station in life, don't have a solid place to stand in life. You don't need someone who's wishy-washy. Someone who is this way one day and another way some other day. You never know what you're going to find with them. He says there to meddle not with those that are given to change, that are constantly changing, that change from one day to the next, that may change from 1 hour to the next, sometimes from 1 minute to the next. Be careful of being friends with those that don't have a standard that they live by, that they stand by, that aren't solid in what they believe and where they stand. Because when you become friends with those that are this way today and another way tomorrow and are back and forth and in and out, really bring you to destruction. And Solomon says, with such a one, someone who's given to change, he said, don't meddle with that person. Don't spend your time with that person. Look at chapter 25. In chapter 25, begin with verse 18. A man that beareth false witness against his neighbor is a maul and a sword and a sharp arrow. Confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. As he that taketh away a garment in cold weather and is vinegar upon nitre, he says, so is he that singeth songs to a heavy heart. A man that beareth false witness against his neighbor, maul, a sword, a sharp arrow, confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble like a broken tooth, and like a foot that's out of joint. Brethren, he said, that's not who you need as a friend. That's not who you need to form your friendships with. You may remember that last week, you may not remember, but back in chapter 1, we looked at these verses last week, starting with verse 10 and reading through verse 19. And in verses 10 through 19, what he says is, don't give yourself over to those that are given to violence. Don't be friends with angry people. And understand something else. If people can so quickly get angry with somebody else, and if someone can be so angry with others, they'll be angry with you one of these days. Just mark it down. If people will speak evil of others to you, they will speak to others evil about you. It's always been that way. And Solomon warns you against it. Solomon says, be careful about making friends with those that want to talk about other people, that want to meddle in the affairs of other people, that want to talk evil of other people. Because if they talk evil of other people, you be assured that when they're with other people, they're talking evil about you. And you may not believe it, but look back in 20 years and see if what Solomon says is not right, because it is. It has been, and it will be. Solomon says, there's some folks you don't need as your friends. And if you've got someone who is a gossip, he's short-tempered, he's given to drinking, he's someone who's always changing, he's not trustworthy, and he's given to violence, that's not a person you need as a friend. That may be someone you try to help. Maybe someone you try to help to see better, to do better. But don't make that person your friend. Don't bring them into your life, because they'll harm you. And Solomon says, watch out for those. Now, he tells you there's some friends you need. You know, Solomon doesn't just in this book say, you stay away from these people, because you might get the impression he's saying, well, by the time I do that, I don't have anybody left. No. That's not what he said. He said there's some people that you need as your friends. There's some friends you need. Look in chapter 13. Look in chapter 13. And in chapter 13, drop down to verse 20. He says, he that walketh with wise men shall be wise, and a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Choose to walk with those that are wise. Choose to walk with those that have wisdom in life. Choose to walk with those who show wisdom in their lives. In chapter 13, back up to verse 14, because he tells you another thing you ought to look for in someone to be a friend. He said, the law of the wise is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death. Brethren, seek those that have wisdom to be friends. Seek those who are wise in their ways, that understand, that care and are concerned. Just as surely as the wrong friends can lead you away from God, and they can cause you troubles, they can end up causing you your soul, costing you your soul. You remember what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15:33? American Standard Version says, evil companionships corrupt good morals. Evil companionships corrupt good morals. You ever known people that were just really good people? They wouldn't do things they shouldn't do. They wouldn't engage in things they shouldn't engage in. They were good people. They had good parents, they had a good upbringing, and they would not engage in some things except when they got around certain people. And have you ever known people that just seemed like you couldn't keep them away from some people? It's what causes trouble. Solomon says this is what causes trouble. When you can't separate from those that would destroy you, would hurt you, would harm you, when you are not wise in choosing those that have wisdom in life, he said it's not helpful to you. Choose friends wisely. Now, if a man's going to have friends, he's got to show himself friendly. We talked about that to begin with. So be sure that you make yourself the kind of individual that is a good friend, that would be a good friend to another. For there's always the need in our lives for friends, for good friends, for those that will help us in life. So make yourself available as a good friend. Make yourself into someone who will be a good friend. Now, in becoming your good friend, you see, here's the sticky part. You can have those in life that are really good friends. The hard part, it seems that the hard part, is often in hanging on to them. Keeping, not losing, not letting something happen that draws them away or ruins the friendship. If you want to maintain a good friend, if you want to maintain a good friendship, let me tell you what Solomon says about maintaining that friendship. Obtaining it and maintaining it. Look at chapter 17. Look in chapter 17 and drop down to verse 9. He that covereth a transgression seeketh love. And he didn't say that covers up sin and hides it and keeps someone from knowing about it. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about someone who helps another to overcome his transgression, to overcome his sin. He said he seeketh love. He that repeateth a manner separateth very friends, close friends, good friends. He said if you want to be a friend and you want to maintain a friendship, help your friends to cover up by the blood of Christ, to cover up their sins. Because the only way they're going to cover their sins is by the blood of Christ. No sin can be forgiven, no sin can be covered up except by the blood of Christ. And the best friend you can be is someone who will help another to cover his sin. And the only way you can cover that sin is through the blood of Jesus Christ. The only one. In chapter 17, if you drop down to verse 14, it says the second thing. You're going to maintain friendship. The beginning of strife is as when one letteth out water. Therefore leave off contention before it be meddled with. Don't be contentious. Don't be looking for an argument. Don't always be trying to cause strife and division. Don't be looking for something you can contend about, something you can argue about, something you can disagree about. Don't look for that. Because you know one of the truths is that if you're looking for it, you can find it. If that's what you're seeking, you can be sure you'll find it. It's there to be found. It always has been. Let me tell you a third thing that he says about keeping a friend, hanging on to a friend. When you look at chapter 25, and in chapter 25 you drop down to verse 17, he says, withdraw thy foot from thy neighbor's house, lest he be weary of thee and hate thee. You want to know how to be a good friend? Don't overstay your welcome. You know, a good friend is someone who knows when you need them, and they know when you need them to go. And so if you want to be a good friend, don't try to push yourself into a situation and remain there and stay there and be there when you're not needed. Learn to withdraw yourself from a person, from an individual, lest you become weary of it, tired of it, doesn't want to see you. Rather, leave them at a time when they want you to come back and can't wait to see you again. Don't stay so long with that individual that he can't wait for you to leave and doesn't want to answer the door the next time you show up. Don't be such that someone becomes weary of you, tired of your presence. That's not a good way to present yourself as a friend. Look in chapter 26. In chapter 26, drop down to verse 17. We'll notice several things here, beginning with verse 17. If you want to be a good friend, you want to maintain a friendship, he said, he that passeth by and meddleth with strife belongeth not to him that is like that, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. He that passeth by and meddleth with strife. If you're always meddling in somebody else's business, it'll hurt friendships. Don't try to meddle in everybody else's business. Don't try to tell everybody else how smart you are and what you do. Because if you're good friends with that person that's got these kinds of troubles, it's probably because you're someone that has had the same kinds of troubles and you aren't too good at getting out of it yourself before, so don't try to help somebody else. Don't meddle in other people's matters. Don't try to tell everybody else how smart you are. He said it's like someone that grabs a dog by the ears. You ever had a dog by the ears? Brethren, you can't hang on and you can't let him go. Because if you let him go, he's going to bite you. And you can't hang on because you just can't hang on. At some point, you got to let him go. But if he's trying to get to you and you're holding him by the ears, brethren, you're in a dilemma. You can't let go and you can't hold on. So what he says is, don't be like somebody that takes hold of something and meddles in somebody else's affairs. He said you're like someone that grabs a dog by the ears. Now notice the second thing that he says about if you want to be a good friend. Verse 18. He said, as a madman who casteth firebrands, arrows, and death, so is the man that deceiveth his neighbor, and saith, I just did this in sport, I was just joking. You ever known someone that would do something just hateful and unkind, and they say, oh, I was just joking, I didn't mean it, I was just joking, I was just kidding. They say unkind things, they are hateful, they are despiteful, they're all these things, and then when they see that you're getting angry, you're getting upset, you're ready to tell them where to go, and to get out of your life, and to get away from you. When they see that you're to that point, they'll say, oh, I was just joking, I didn't mean anything by it, I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything. And what he says here, if you've got those kinds of friends that want to turn to you every time and say, well, I didn't mean anything, I was just joking. If they're always just joking, that's not the kind of people you need for friends. Brethren, they're not going to be your friends. Look at the third thing that he says in this passage is in verse 20. He says, where no wood is, the fire goes out. So where there's no talebearer, the strife ceases. Brethren, don't be a talebearer. Don't be looking to speak to somebody else. Don't be looking to tell everybody else everything you know. The best friend you can be is the friend who can keep his mouth, can hold his tongue, that doesn't have to tell everything he knows. Now look at the fourth thing that he says in this passage in verse 21. You want to be a good friend. As coals are to burning coals, and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. Brethren, don't do things that just keep on stirring things up. Don't be contentious. And then finally, when you get over to chapter 27 and verse 14, he said, he that blesseth his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it shall be counted a curse for him. If all you can do is give insincere flattery to another, if that's what you do, if that's how you do, that's not a good friend. That's not what a good friend does. That's not how he treats you. That's not how he is. That's not who he is. Now, if you follow that advice, you'll end up you'll be less likely to offend your friends. You'll be less likely to cut off friends. But now, also understand that if you lose a friend because of the foolish ways in which you treat that friend, I want you to know it's hard to regain a friendship that's been lost. Verse 19 of chapter 18 says, a brother offended is harder to win than a strong city. Friend, it's hard to regain the confidence of another when you've lost it. When you've done those things, said those things that have been hurtful to another, it's hard to get their confidence back. That's why Solomon says to be careful about what you're saying. Be careful about your speech. Don't always be so quick to speak. So how do you solve problems that you have with your friends? Because you're going to have problems if you have friends. I want to notice some things quickly. I'm going to notice them quickly. But let me also just say this. Someone probably this morning thought, well, you know, the preacher must not have been feeling good because he preached a short sermon. Well, sometimes you preach short sermons because you're going to follow it up with one's going to make up for it. And so understand that. The second thing you ought to understand is that if they start 5 minutes late like they did tonight, then I'm allowed to preach as long as I want to. Just so you know. In chapter 16, I want you to drop down to verse 7. And I want you to note that if you want to have a friend, the first thing you've got to have is you've got to have peace with God. He says, when a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. The first thing that you need to do, if you want to have friends, is you need to be friends with God. You need to make peace with God. If your life's not what it ought to be with God, then make it right. And make it right first and foremost. Please God. Be at peace with God. You can't be at peace with others if you're not at peace with God. And more important than being at peace with others is that you are at peace with God. Look back at chapter 15. And in chapter 15, look at verse 18. Because in chapter 15 and verse 18, he says, a wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeaseth strife. Don't be so quick to get angry. Don't be so quick to get angry. Be careful how you let yourself go and become angry, often for no reason. Look at chapter 18, 17. Chapter 18, I'm sorry. I turned over those pages. Look at chapter 18. In chapter 18, he says in verse 13, he that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it's folly and shame unto it. Brethren, be slow to respond. When someone says something, and even if they say something that's hateful or unkind, don't think you've got to answer immediately. Learn to sit and think about your words before you say them. Learn to stop and consider what you're saying and what influence that what you say may have on others before you say it. In chapter 20 and verse 3, he said it's an honor for a man to cease from strife, but every fool will be meddling. Brethren, what he says is avoid quarreling. Avoid always getting into a quarrel and arguing. Don't be looking for an argument. And one of the passages in the book of Proverbs that I think many of us need, if we need anything in the book of Proverbs, is in chapter 15 and verse 1. He said, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Speak softly. You know what I found out years ago in preaching? When I would be my loudest, people weren't listening. When I would see how loud I could get, and listen, sometimes you need to speak up and speak loudly so that people can hear you. But let me also tell you that I found out a long time ago that if you drop down and start speaking more softly, now I know there's a problem there because some people who don't hear as well, they have troubles if you get down and you start speaking softly. So you don't need to speak so softly that people can't hear you, but if you speak softly, people will listen more carefully. Generally speaking. A soft answer turneth away wrath. Grievous words stir up anger. Back up to chapter 10. In chapter 10, look down to verse 19. He said, In the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise. Learn to speak briefly. Learn to guard your words. Learn that the abundance of your words doesn't mean that you're smart or that you know more. Back up to verse 12. Hatred stirreth up strife, but love covereth all sins. Speak to an individual in love. Speak to them in a way that expresses the care and concern that you have for them. And a final thing I would say about this is chapter 28. In chapter 28, I want you to note that if you have a good friend, if he is your friend, understand in chapter 28 and verse 23, he said, He that rebuketh a man afterwards shall find more favor than he that flattereth with his tongue. Understand that there are times you're going to have to rebuke a friend. Understand that when it's necessary, there will have to be rebuking. You can't always flatter and go along with and support and encourage someone in everything they say or do. If you're friends, you're going to be able at times to tell them where they're wrong. Rather choose your friends wisely. In this book, the book of Proverbs, what he deals with primarily is being wise. And what you have Solomon speaking to his son about is the need for wisdom. And one of the areas where he says that his son needs wisdom. One of the areas where he says his son is needed is in wisdom. He needs wisdom. You may remember that that's what Solomon asked God for, was wisdom. And he speaks to his son, and what he's saying to him over and over is that as king, you're going to need wisdom. Now I would tell you that his son wasn't so wise. I'll tell you, his son didn't listen to this instruction. And what his father had taught him was not something that he took and held on to. That his son, Rehoboam, was foolish in a lot of ways. He didn't listen to the instruction. If you go back and look at the book of Proverbs and say, if Rehoboam had just listened to his father, if he had just followed the instruction given by his father, if he had looked and sought out God, if he had done those things, the kingdom wouldn't have divided. There wouldn't have been the problems that were faced. That would not have happened. And it won't happen now. If you form the right friendships, good friendships are a blessing. If you've got those that are your good friends, that's a blessing. It's truly a blessing when you have those that are such good friends they do anything for you. If you've got a good friend, they will. They would do anything to help you. They'd be there for you. They'd listen to you. They might rebuke you. They might tell you you're wrong, and you ought to. If they're good friends, you'll accept that. Because you know that they tell it to you because they care about you. They're interested in you. And they won't just agree with you in everything. Having good friends is helpful and needful in being in Christ. In John chapter 15 and verse 13, Jesus said, Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Then he says, And ye are my friends, if you do whatsoever I command you. Is Jesus your friend? Of all the friends that you have, and I hope you have many, I hope you have the right kind of friends. But of all the friends that you have, do you have any that are greater than Jesus? And you know the answer to that. Is he your friend? Do you listen to him? Do you seek his counsel? Do you walk with him? He's calling for you to come home, and if you need to, we beg you to do so. If you're not a Christian, we beg you to become one, and we'd be here to assist you in any way we could to help you become a Christian. If it means sitting down and studying with you, we're here to do that. If it means baptizing you into Christ, we'll do that. If you're one of God's children, you've gotten yourself out of step, we beg you to come home. Repent of the sin, confess it, let brothers and sisters in Christ pray for you. We beg you to come home while you have time and opportunity, while you can. And if you're subject to his invitation, while your friend is calling for you to come. Best friend you'll ever have, calling for you to come. If you need to, won't you? All stand and sing.